Recording? Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. We are going to record this presentation, so if you have someone that you want to share it with later, then you can. Everybody is kind of off camera right now. We are going to have a demonstration portion at the end, so it may be helpful to turn your camera on at that point, and we'll edit those parts out before we post it to social media. So I'll go ahead and just introduce myself. My name is Andrea. I'm a physical therapist here at Capros. I have some extra training and interest in running and endurance athletes. So that's kind of my favorite thing to talk about. So we'll get started with that tonight.
And I'm Jenna Morio. I'm one of the physical therapists here at Capros as well. I've been here for about 5.5 years. I like working with athletes. I like working with runners and kind of all the athletes, but yeah, so we will get started. Thanks for joining us on your Thursday night.
So these are just kind of like our talking points for our presentation tonight. So basically, preseason, where are you starting? The most common running injuries, should you keep running? Kind of the 3 things that make up a healthy athlete, who makes up your team, and then at the end, we'll do some self-checks and corrective exercises. So for preseason training, that's kind of where everybody should be right about now. I think most track seasons are starting around March 1st this year. So hopefully if you're a runner, you're getting a little bit of running in right now. Ideally for more of our distance kiddos, we'd like to see you in like 10, 15 miles a week right now. That way that when you actually get into your season, that you have a little bit of that base and you're not going from no miles to running for 2 hours at a track practice every night. Because when you do get into your season, like it's Iowa, so it's cold, it's windy. Sometimes it's not the best weather to be running outside. So a lot of times coaches will have you doing a lot of running in the hall. That has been like a kind of a big contributor to shin splints. So sometimes during this preseason or at the very beginning of the season, it's a good opportunity to work more on cross training. So if you have access to a bike or have access to a pool, maybe a good time to be getting some cardiovascular exercise in that way. And then also working on some strength training and agilities. There's a couple of studies out there that show that strength training, even like 15 minutes a week or 15 minutes a day for 3 days out of the week, can really improve your strength and reduce your risk of running injury, as well as improve your performance. So it's a really simple way to get a lot of bang for your buck on just a couple minutes per day. So athletes, I would really stress that you communicate to your coaches kind of like where you're coming in for the season. So if you have not done any running in your preseason or your off season, and you expect to run kind of with the top group as soon as you start, that is probably not going to go super well for you. So just communicate to the coaches that you like just where you are. And then if you are someone that has been running basically since cross country season and maybe never took any time off, then that could be another sign too that you have maybe not coming in with totally fresh legs, right? A lot of times you want to come in prepared, but you don't want to be running as many miles as maybe you see people on Instagram running or people on social media that you're comparing yourself to. Make sure that you're prepared for what you want to do for your upcoming season.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the common running injuries that we see here in the clinic. And I want to keep this fairly informal. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and you guys can ask questions. So Shin splints. We'll go a little bit through shin splints. So this is definitely the most common injury we see in runners, especially during the start of track season. This goes back to Andrea's point on what are you doing in the off season? You know, typically these patients that say, well, I might have ran a mile a day or I ran a few days a week. These rapid increases in training loads tend to be the culprit of shin splints. Some other things that can lead to shin splints is overstriding. And that's something that we could do with a running analysis, or your coach can look at low cadence. So when you look at cadence, 165 steps per minute or less, that tends to lead to some more of the shin splints and more of the overstriding. So we tend to shoot for 170 to 180 steps per minute. And then one thing to caution here is that shin splints can sometimes lead to a stress reaction fracture. So, and that can cause you to sit out for the whole season. So we just urge you, if our athletes or your athletes have any sort of shin splints, you just get that taken care of. You take the proper rest for that. And we go into patellar tendinopathy. So this tends to be the anterior knee pain, so front of the knee pain. And it's typically localized just below the kneecap. And this is often triggered by too much hill running and or just poor training. And so what we commonly see in the clinic is poor single leg control. Did somebody say something? Nope. So what we commonly see is poor single leg control, along with some glute med and quad weakness. And this is some of the things that we'll look at later. And we'll show you guys how to check how strong your glutes are, how to check how strong your quads are, and looking at single limb symmetry. So then we look at Itbn friction syndrome. So this is your typical lateral knee pain. And this is often triggered by a scissoring gait pattern. Again, coaches will tend to pick up on this, and we'll see it in the clinic if we do some sort of running analysis. And it's a common theme here. So we also see poor single leg control, and we also see glute med and lateral hip weakness associated with Itbn friction syndrome. And we go to hip flexor or hamstring strains. So we tend to see this a little bit more common in our sprinters. These typically and should resolve in 1 to 3 weeks if it's just a low grade strain. Typically following some rest, this tends to resolve. The key here is that we want to avoid early stretching of the muscles. And we recommend pain-free walking for 30 minutes before returning to level ground running. Side-to-side agility work and cross-training like biking or swimming is a great way to work on cardio while resting from running.
Okay, so I'm just going to preface this slide by saying that our goal really is to keep you running. Our goal is not to force you to stop running. And I've heard some athletes say, well, I didn't really want to talk to my athletic trainer, or I didn't really want to bring it up to my coaches because I didn't want to sit out. The sooner that you bring something up, the sooner that we can address it and get it taken care of. So with that in mind, we do have kind of like a stoplight system that we use to decide whether you should continue running or if we should take some time off or just modify your workouts. So we'll talk about that green zone first. So this is if you don't have any pain while running, great, carry on. If you're kind of like having a little bit of like a nagging pain, like a little bit of muscle soreness or just a little bit of ache when you run, but it's pretty low level. You can kind of put it at the back of your mind when you're running. And then once you stop running, it doesn't bother you at all. That puts you in that green light category. So you wouldn't necessarily have to modify any of your workouts. You'd be able to train fully with your team and compete as expected. This would be a good time to bring that up to your athletic trainer and just say, hey, my shin is bothering me, and they can give you some exercises and stretches to help it get better and make sure that they're kind of keeping an eye on your training load so that it doesn't get any worse. So if you're the person that kind of ignored that shin pain and now we're 4 weeks into track and it's still there, it never really went away like you thought it would, And instead of being just there while you're running, now it's kind of like sticking around for a little bit after you run. That kind of puts you into a yellow training zone. So this may be a time where we would modify some of your workouts. So with this, pain is usually around like a 4 or a 5, and it should go away within an hour after you stop running. So if you go home, you eat dinner, get up to work on your homework, and it's still kind of talking at you, that's something that we want to pay attention to. And you should feel back to your baseline the following morning. So that means you should wake up and be able to get out of bed and not really have any pain as you're walking and kind of getting ready for the day. If your pain is still there the following morning, that may mean that we need to modify even more. Now, this is not specific to muscle soreness. We expect you to be muscularly sore. You're going to be doing new workouts, pushing yourself farther and faster with your times for sprints and for distance running, jumping, throwing. We expect muscle soreness. What we're concerned about is pain that does not go away with rest. So if you have pain with like every single step that you take, it is definitely at the forefront of your mind while you're running. And it is still there after you stop, still there the following morning. Unfortunately, that does put you into that red category where we need to consider stopping running for a period of time. Again, the sooner that we can address these things, the better, because you have a better chance of making it back for part of your competitive season versus just having to sit out for the rest of the year. One thing that Jenna touched on is a stress fracture or a stress reaction. And if we know or suspect that you do have a or a bone stress injury, that is something that we take pretty seriously. And unfortunately, we would just have you be doing cross training, strength training with that, because they can turn into a pretty serious injury. And with bone stress injuries, it does have implications for your season, but as well as your future health of your bones. And so we don't want to do anything to kind of harm that in these initial like injury stages too.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the 3 pillars of a healthy athlete. So exercise, nutrition, and sleep. Exercise, so this is where your coaches are the experts here. They will be the go-to for developing the most effective training program for you. So strength training is especially for the hips and core should be a part of this training program. And these are things that we'll discuss a little bit later in this presentation. Nutrition. So runners tend to burn a ton of calories, right? So it's important to get nutrient dense food 5 to 6 times a day, or every 2 to 4 hours during the day to support performance, recovery, and optimal body composition. It's crucial that you stay hydrated throughout the day. This will also help reduce muscle cramping and promote muscle recovery. We won't be getting too much in depth with nutrition, but it's definitely something that as a team and as an athlete, you should definitely look at, and making sure that you get protein for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's kind of the building blocks for building muscle. And so if you have poor nutrition, that can definitely affect your performance out on the track. So if your team or you have any interest in a nutritionist or having a nutritionist come and talk to your team, we definitely have resources for that. And don't hesitate, like reach out to Andrea or I, and we can definitely send you some contact information for local nutritionists that do kind of specialize in the runner. And then we're going to talk a little bit about sleep. So this may be a topic that isn't always talked about during season, or kind of maybe even be placed a little bit on the back burner, especially as a student athlete. And so Andrea and I want to highlight the importance of sleep in runners. So the recommended guidelines for sleep is 7 to 9 hours a night. The biggest disruptor of our sleep is, of no surprise, it's our cell phones. And so blue light emission, so that's going to be all your screen time. So your iPads, your TV, your cell phones, your computers. So blue light emissions from screens actually disrupts the body's natural melatonin production. So too much screen time will reduce melatonin, and in return, that's going to disrupt just how well you sleep. And so melatonin production also helps in circadian rhythm, and not getting enough sleep is going to affect next morning alertness. And so some of the dangers of sleep deprivation is impaired brain function. And so that can lead to slower reaction times during takeoffs. Unhealthy eating, that can lead to glycogen depletion and greater fatigue throughout the day and during the meets. And it can lead to increased inflammatory cytokines, which that can impair muscle recovery and lead to greater risk for injury. It can decrease sprint times, and it's also been shown in research to decrease distance covered. So tips for better sleeping is staying consistent with your bedtime, whether that is during the weekday or on the weekend. So just trying to get up at the same time every single day, including weekends and holidays. Avoiding screen time for 2 hours before bed, which that is probably going to. So I would recommend, even if you can reduce your screen time but to like a half hour, not looking at screens for a half hour before bed. That's likely better than what you're. And then keeping the bedroom quiet and as dark as possible. And then research also shows that exposing yourself to natural sunlight first thing when you wake up in the morning is super helpful, just to kind of wake you up for the day.
I just have one more point on kind of the combination of all of those things. So a combination of kind of over exercising, not enough sleep, and inadequate nutrition can cause a concept called overtraining. So basically that is when your body has been kind of pushed to the max. It's not getting enough recovery from the intense workouts that you're doing with sleep as well as with your nutrition. And with overtraining, it's just you don't have the energy for school, you don't have energy to run. Your performance might start to take a little bit of a dip on the track as well. Particularly with females, you may notice changes in your menstrual cycle or that it stops entirely. If that is you, please talk with your parents and your doctor about that, because that ties really closely into your bone health. And like we were saying earlier, those bone stress injuries are some of the more serious injuries that we see in track. And they do have implications for like your future health down the road when you're in your 20s, 30s, 50s, as far as like your increased chance of developing osteopenia, which is weak bones, or osteoporosis. So we just want to be really careful with that. And then this is just a quote from Carrie Tollefson. She's an Olympic marathoner, and just her quote about being injured and coming back. And it is really hard to be injured, to sit on the sidelines and watch your teammates compete and have success, or to kind of see your goals for your season maybe shift or start to change because of an injury. Take the time, communicate with your coaches, communicate with your athletic training staff, get healthy, and come back to competition at 100%. You know, you're not the best contributor for yourself at 75%, and you're not your best contributor for yourself or for your team at 75%. So make sure that you're doing what you need to recover and get back to 100%. So your team, you typically think of your team as you and your fellow athletes on the team. I just want to highlight that your team also includes your parents, your coaches, and then your athletic trainer and medical staff. So us as your physical therapists, doctors, and let your athletic trainers know if something is off. Like we talked about with that green light system, it is way easier to treat and catch a problem at the beginning of the season or when you're having a lot less pain than if you push it off and think, well, this will feel better in a couple weeks, and then it doesn't. And then it's right before your most important meet of the season, and it's hard to kind of manage everything at that point. So make sure that you're communicating with parents, coaches, and your medical staff. And if you do need to see your athletic trainer, or you do need to come in and see us, know that we will also communicate with your athletic trainer at your school, with your parents, and with your coaches, so that everybody's on the same page as far as your recovery. So what the physical therapy exercises that you're doing, what the running or cross-training workouts that you're doing are, and kind of what the expectations are as far as whether you should be running or taking some time off. So we make sure to kind of close the circle there on communicating with everybody.
Okay, so this is gonna be the interactive part. If you guys could all turn on your videos, you don't have to turn on the sound, but turn on the videos. I'm gonna take Andrea through these. There are 5 easy self-checks. So this is a good way to kind of just check yourself and see, okay, do I have good balance? Do I have good strength? Can I do these 5 things? If I can't, what am I missing? How can I improve upon this? We're gonna go through 5 self-checks that it's good for runners to go through, and just to get an idea of if there's any weakness present. So I'm gonna take Andrea through these 5 self-checks. First one's gonna be single leg bridge. You're laying back. Andrea's gonna bend both her knees up, feet together. I'm gonna have her put her arms up in the air so she can't cheat. I'm gonna cue her to lift her hips up in the air, and I want her to straighten out her left leg. So, what we're gonna do here is see if she can hold it here for 30 seconds. What I'm looking for here is to make sure her hips stay even. If the hip starts to drop on the opposite side, then, which it's starting to drop there, I'll cue her just a little bit. If she can't keep it there, go ahead and come back down. That tells us that that's hard to do, and so we'll end that test there, and you're going to look at how many seconds you can hold up. We're going to do the same thing on the opposite side. Go ahead and turn straight up in the air, straighten this right leg out. Good, same thing, we want to make sure that the thighs stay level, hips stay even. Think about setting a glass of water on her hips. And we'll time this. And she's starting to shake a little bit. She does a little bit better on this side. Okay, come back down. Okay. The next one is going to be single leg heel raises. Go ahead and stand on up. And what we'll do is we'll come up against the wall. And she's going to hold on to the wall, and she's going to stand on one leg, keeping her knees straight. She's going to lift up into a heel raise as high as she can. And so what we're looking for here is for her to be able to keep the knees straight, lift that heel up as high as she can. The goal is 30 repetitions here. You'll stop if your knee starts to bend, if you're starting to use momentum to get yourself up, or if the heel's just not wanting to lift off the ground, then that tells that there's some weakness that you might need to work through. Good, and switch sides. And then we're looking for symmetry in runners. So we want to make sure that if you're able to do 30 reps on one side, you can do 30 reps on the other side as well. And by the end of this, you should feel like your calves are burning a little bit, which is completely normal, but if you're able to do 30 reps on each side, it tells me that you have pretty good calf strength and endurance. Number 3 is going to be so we're going to do a lateral step down from 6-inch step, or you can do it from a stair at home. And what we're going to do is Andrew's going to put her hands on her hips, and Garrett's going to come in the front. And what we want to do is Andrew's going to tap her left heel down towards the ground and back up. And we'll look at 10 repetitions of this. And so what we're looking for here is we want to make sure that our hips stay nice and level. If we see that her hip starts to drop on one side, then that means that there's some instability or some weakness on that right hip. And you want to make sure that she goes down, that the knee is tracking over her second toe or pointed towards the 12 o'clock position. If that knee's starting to cave in a little bit, that also tells us that there's some weakness or instability of that right hip. We'll do the same thing on that left side. And as runners, it's good that we have good symmetry, and so we want to make sure it feels the same and on both sides, and it feels just as strong on the left side as it does on the right side. Good, and now we're going to go into closed penetrating dorsiflexion. So what we're going to do is come over to the wall, and this is looking at ankle mobility. So for runners, it's important that we have good ankle mobility. One good self-check is come up against the wall. What Andrea's going to do is we're going to test out the right foot first. So we're going to keep the right foot on the ground. She's going to try and get that knee to touch the wall, keeping that heel down. So her heel's starting to lift a little bit, so we want to go a little bit closer to the wall. So this is the point where she can keep her heel down and the knee touches the wall. She'll probably feel a little bit of stiffness in that ankle, and I just want to mark where this is. And then we'll do the same thing on the other side. And again, we want symmetry side to side. And so normal is 3 to 5 inches toe to wall. And we want no more than 3/4 of an inch difference side to side. Good. She does a little bit better on her left side. So if we come on over here and we measure her, she is about 3.5 inches away from the wall. 3 to 5 inches is normal. She's a little bit better on her left side. Left side compared to her right side, but again, you can see that's within 3/4 of an inch, so we'd call that normal. The last one, come on over here, is a side plank. So go ahead and lay on your left side. Let's do right side. So this is going to look at hip and core strength. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into a side plank on the elbow, on her feet, and I'm going to have her bring her left arm up in the air, and we want everything pointed forward, hips pointed forward. It's okay if she wants to scissor her feet, or her feet can be stacked on top of each other. We want to make shoulders stacked over top of elbows. And so this is really testing the right side, right obliques, right glutes. She's at about 22 seconds. If her hips start to drop a little bit, that is a sign of weakness. Go ahead and switch sides. You want to make sure this looks the same side to side. This already looks a little bit easier for her to do. Yeah. So again, you just want to look side to side, make sure that you're able to hold it 30 to 60 seconds on each side. Come back down. Cool.
Okay, so I'm going to take Jenna through some corrective exercises. So we've got 3 ideas of things that you can use to help work on your strength and mobility if you found with some of those tests that you had a couple things to work on. So the first thing that we're going to do is called a runner core form. There's 4 separate exercises. So Jenna's going to stand on her right leg. The first one, she's going to have a straight knee here, and then she's going to take her heel and push back and out at about a 45-degree angle. So she's going to do 10 reps there. We're watching for balance and make sure that that knee continues to face straight forward. And then the second one, she is just going to tap her heel down to the light toe tap, nice and controlled, driving that knee forward, with a small pause for balance at the top. We want to do 10 reps as well here. So important at the top that you're not going so far up and tucking like this, or keep everything nice and tall. Okay. Our next corrective is some side stepping. So this helps work on glutes, muscles on the outside of your legs here. So then you're going to put that band just below her knees. And then she is going to keep her feet about hip width apart and take side steps. She wants to keep in a little bit of a bent knee and bent hip position. And you want to never bring the feet to touch each other because that would put very much resistance onto the band. So usually I'll do this exercise for about 1 to 2 minutes with breaks as needed for each athlete. Exercise. This is for hip and core strength. So Jenna is going to do a star plank. So she's going to come up from her knee into her elbow, and then keep that top leg elevated. So that adds a little bit more challenge to core and balance with this exercise. And she's really going to feel that on the glute that's closer to the ground. Okay, I think that was all the questions that we had in the chat. Does anybody else have questions or anything with what we talked about tonight?
Would you ever use the runner's core 4 as like a warm up to a workout or like a recovery tool at the end?
I do, yeah. So if you're someone that has a hard time kind of getting those glutes to fire, or like you struggle with fatigue towards the end of your run, I definitely recommend doing that one before you go, because it will force you to use your glutes. And so that's a good way to kind of like get in touch with what that should feel like before you run.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us tonight. And then if you guys have any questions, or if you guys have any more questions on nutritionists, I think one of the, we're going to try and do some sort of presentation like this at least every few months. And if we have more interest, we could do it once a month. If there's enough interest to have like a nutritionist on the panel, we can definitely do something like that. Or if you guys have any other ideas for some sort of presentation, like we're open for it, and we'll do it once a month if we have interest. We're just kind of going by interests that we have for the community. So if you have any interests, just shoot us an email.
Yeah, and so our emails are listed there, or you can get it to hold of us on our Facebook page, or just calling our clinic. And we love to work with runners of all ages and capabilities, or any kind of sports injuries that's out there. So just let us know how we can help you guys out.
Thanks, guys.